All right, so if you're like me and love to dive deep into Go, especially if you're looking to build some really cool back-end applications,
Oh, yeah.
or, maybe even tackle those complex distributed systems,
Yeah.
we've got some really cool material today that might just change your entire approach.
For sure, Go is super powerful.
Yeah.
But building these systems the traditional way, it can get really complex.
Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah, and today we're going to explore how a new framework is trying to solve some of those challenges head on.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
All right.
One of the biggest things I always run into is just the amount of configuration and infrastructure management.
Uh-huh.
I feel like I need a dedicated DevOps team
Yeah,
just to get things up and running.
it's a common pain point.
It is.
And what's interesting about this framework is it tries to automate a lot of that heavy lifting that normally falls to DevOps.
So you're telling me I could go from coding on my local machine
Yeah.
to having my application deployed in the cloud without needing this whole separate team?
Yeah, that's the idea. And the cool thing is it does this all with a single code base.
Oh, wow.
So you don't have to juggle different configurations for local development and for your preview deployment.
Yay.
And production, it's all streamlined.
That would save so much time.
Yeah, for sure.
But doesn't that usually lock you into a specific cloud platform?
That's a great question.
What if I want to switch from AWS to GCP?
Yeah, so a core part of this framework is it's cloud agnostic.
Okay.
It has this abstraction layer over cloud provider APIs, so you're not tied to any single one.
Okay.
So it makes migrating a lot less painful.
That's a big plus because I like to experiment with different environments.
Right.
But let's get a bit more specific.
Yeah.
One thing that always intimidated me is building microservices.
Yeah.
How does this framework approach that?
So imagine this. Building a microservice is as simple as just creating a Go package
Okay.
within your application.
All right.
So the framework handles all the complexities of communication service discovery, all the infrastructure magic.
So essentially, I can just focus on the core logic of that microservice,
Yeah,
the actual functionality I'm trying to build without worrying too much about the infrastructure setup.
exactly.
That sounds awesome.
It's super liberating.
It does.
And the benefits go beyond just that.
Okay.
APIs are also a core part of backend applications, and this is where the framework really shines.
Okay. I'm all ears because APIs are essential, but writing all that boilerplate code
Yeah,
to handle HTTP requests and routing can be tedious.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
But with this framework, you essentially define your APIs by just adding simple annotation.
Hold on, so I don't have to write all that code
Yeah.
to handle the ins and outs of HTTP.
Yeah, the framework generates all of that for you, saving you tons of time and effort. Right. And you have fine-grained control.
Okay.
So you can define public APIs for anyone to access.
Right.
Private APIs only accessible within your application, and even APIs that require authentication.
So not only do I get type-safe APIs in Go, which is already fantastic,
Yeah.
but this makes it super easy to set up.
Exactly.
This sounds almost too good to be true.
It's pretty powerful.
It is.
And it also streamlines your local development.
Okay.
So it sets up the necessary infrastructure on your machine using Docker to mirror your production environment.
Wait, so as I'm developing,
Yeah.
I'm not in some isolated environment.
Right.
I'm actually running my code in something that's close to the real deal.
Precisely.
Okay.
So you can catch potential issues early on
Right.
because it's behaving like your production environment will.
That saves a lot of headaches down the line.
For sure.
This is starting to sound really cool.
Yeah.
But let's dig a little deeper
Okay.
into how this handles some of the challenges that we face as Go developers.
Right.
Databases, for example, can be a real pain to manage.
Yeah.
How does this framework simplify that?
So it has native support for Postgres.
Okay.
And it treats databases as like a logical resource. So you essentially create a database just by calling a function and assigning it to a variable in your code.
Did you just say creating a database is as simple as declaring a variable?
It really is that straightforward.
Wow.
And it handles all the heavy lifting of provisioning the database, regardless of whether you're running locally with Docker or deploying to the cloud.
So I don't have to manually set up database servers,
Yep.
configure users and permissions,
If you don't want to.
or manage connections.
No, it's all abstracted away.
Yeah.
It's a simple API to interact with your database.
This is sounding fantastic.
Yeah.
But what about flexibility?
Yeah.
Can I still use other databases if I need to?
For sure.
Or am I stuck with Postgres?
While it has native support for Postgres,
Right.
you can still integrate other databases if you need to.
Okay.
It's about giving you a streamlined approach for the common cases without boxing you in.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What about managing migrations?
Yeah.
Those can be a real pain.
So it uses a migration-based approach. where you define your schema changes in SQL files,
Right.
and it automatically applies those migrations when you deploy.
So I can basically version control my database schema
Exactly.
and have it update alongside my application code.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it even handles rollbacks
Oh,
if
nice.
something goes wrong during a migration,
That's important.
which is crucial
Yeah.
for data integrity.
I can already see how much time and effort this could save
Yeah.
in my development workflow.
Yeah, and we've only scratched the surface here.
Okay.
There's a lot more to uncover about how this simplifies other aspects of backend development,
Okay.
like asynchronous tasks,
Okay.
managing sensitive information, and
Right.
even building those cloud-agnostic applications we talked about.
Well, I'm definitely hooked.
Uh,
Let's dive into those other areas and see what else this framework has to offer.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
You mentioned asynchronous tasks earlier, and this framework has this really interesting way of handling them through something called PubSub.
PubSub.
Yeah.
I've heard that term before,
Yeah.
but I'm a little fuzzy on the details.
Yeah.
Could you maybe break it down for me?
Sure.
Like, why is it so important for these back-end systems?
So think of it this way. You have different parts of your application that need to communicate,
Okay.
but they don't need to do it synchronously,
Okay.
where one part has to wait for the other.
So like when a user signs up on a website and you want to send them a welcome email,
Exactly.
the user shouldn't have to wait for that email to be sent
Right.
before they can use the site.
Exactly. So PubSub,
Okay.
which stands for Publisher Subscriber,
Right.
it gives you this way to set up these channels
Okay.
where one part of your application, the publisher, can send out messages or events,
Uh-huh.
and other parts, the subscribers can listen to those events and react accordingly.
Okay.
And they do this without being directly dependent on each other.
So it's kind of like a message board.
Yeah.
Where the publisher posts an announcement
Yeah,
and any subscribers who are interested can take action.
that's a great analogy. And this framework makes PubSub surprisingly easy to work with.
Okay.
So you define a topic, which is like the channel for your messages,
Right.
and then you can create these subscribers that listen to specific topics,
Uh-huh.
and they have functions that get triggered when an event is published.
So in that email example,
Yeah.
when the user signs up,
Yeah.
the registration process would publish an event to a user-registered topic,
Right.
and the email service would subscribe to that,
Yeah.
and then trigger the function to send that welcome email.
You got it.
Okay.
The real beauty of this is it decouples those services.
Right.
The user registration doesn't need to know anything about the email service and vice versa.
That makes sense.
They just communicate through these events.
That sounds really powerful for building flexible systems.
It is.
Like if you need to add another action that happens when a user signs up,
Right.
you just create a new subscriber
Exactly.
and you don't have to touch the original registration code.
Yeah, you don't have to modify anything. And it adds robustness, too. So
Yeah.
if the email service is down for some reason,
Right.
the user registration can still go through, and then the welcome email can be sent later when it's back up.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
You mentioned those at least once and exactly once delivery guarantees.
Oh, yeah.
Can you explain what those mean in this PubSub world?
Absolutely. This is an important distinction,
Okay.
especially when you need to be sure tasks are handled reliably.
Okay.
So at least once means the event will be delivered to the subscriber at least once,
Okay.
but it could potentially be delivered multiple times.
So at least once, make sure it gets through.
Right.
But there's a chance of duplicates,
Exactly.
which might be fine for emails.
Yeah.
But what about things that absolutely can't happen more than once?
Right. So that's where exactly once comes in.
Okay.
It makes sure the event is delivered only one time.
Right.
It's more complex to implement, but it's crucial for tasks where duplicates would be a problem.
Like processing a payment?
Exactly. You don't want that happening multiple times.
Definitely not.
And the framework gives you the flexibility to choose,
Okay.
depending on the needs of your application.
That level of control is really valuable.
Yeah.
We talked about databases and these asynchronous tasks.
Yeah.
What about managing secrets?
Secrets management.
Like API keys,
Yeah.
database passwords,
All that sensitive stuff.
all that sensitive stuff.
Yeah. This framework has a built-in secret manager
Oh,
to handle that. So it's really easy to store and access your secrets securely.
okay. I'm intrigued.
All right.
How does that work?
So it starts with how you define your secrets.
Okay.
You actually do this in your code,
Okay.
but in a structured way using an unexported struct.
Okay.
So the actual values aren't directly in your code base.
So you're not hard coding sensitive values.
Exactly. That's a big security no-no.
It is.
And the framework helps you manage those actual values separately,
Okay.
keeping them encrypted and out of your code repository.
So where do they actually get stored then?
So the framework gives you a few options.
Okay.
You can use their cloud dashboard, where you can securely set and manage secrets for different environments,
Right.
or you can use the command line if you prefer that.
So there's flexibility in how I manage them,
Right?
but the framework ensures they're handled securely.
Exactly. And when you need to use a secret in your code, you just
Mhm.
reference it like any other variable.
Okay.
But the framework handles fetching the actual value at runtime.
So it's taking care of the security behind the scenes.
Exactly.
I like how this is prioritizing both developer experience
Yeah.
and security best practices.
It's about empowering you to build secure applications without getting bogged down in the low-level details.
Right, because those details can be a pain.
They can be.
So we talked about a lot of this, but in terms of application structure,
Mm-hmm.
does this framework push me towards monoliths or microservices?
That's a great question, and one of the really nice things about this framework is it's flexible. It supports both.
So I'm not pigeonholed.
Not at all. You choose the architecture that works best for you.
But usually with microservices, you have these separate code bases,
Right.
which makes it harder to share code and maintain type safety.
Yeah, you're right. But this framework actually uses a monorepo approach.
Okay.
So all your services live within the same code base,
Even if I'm doing microservices.
even if you're building a microservice.
That's all.
Yeah, so you get the benefits of that unified code base.
Right, like IDE auto-completion for API calls,
Exactly.
maintaining type safety across the whole application,
Yes.
simplified dependency management.
All of that.
It's like the best of both worlds.
It is.
You get the flexibility of microservices,
Yeah,
but the convenience of a monolith.
exactly. And to help you organize things, you can group your services into logical systems.
Systems,
Yeah.
so like conceptual categories for my services.
Precisely. So let's say you're building an e-commerce application.
Okay.
You might have a product system, a user system, an orders system, and so on. Right. Each system would have the services related to that specific domain.
So even though they're still independent,
Yeah,
they're grouped together in a way that makes sense.
exactly. It helps you manage complexity as your application grows.
It does, and we haven't even talked about observability yet.
Oh, yeah.
Those features that help you monitor and understand what's happening.
Right, like distributed tracing
Yes.
and a local development dashboard.
Okay. I'm definitely interested in learning more about those.
Yeah, it sounds like they've really thought through the challenges
Well, you have.
of building these systems.
Okay, let's talk observability. I'm really curious about that distributed tracing and the local development dashboard.
Yeah, so observability is so important with these complex systems, and distributed tracing is super helpful.
Okay.
So imagine a user request hits your API gateway,
Right.
gets routed to one service,
Okay.
maybe calls another service, and
Mhm.
so on.
Right.
With tracing, you can actually follow that path as it jumps between all these different services.
So it's like breadcrumbs.
Exactly.
Showing me what happened.
Yeah, you can see how long each step took,
Okay.
where any bottlenecks are.
Right.
You get this clear picture of the whole flow.
That's got to be super useful for debugging performance problems.
It really is.
Or if you're just finding errors.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's cool is this framework has it built in.
Yeah, you don't have to add a bunch of custom code to get this.
That's great.
Yeah.
What about this local development dashboard?
So this is one of my favorite features.
Okay.
When you're running locally, the framework spins up this web-based dashboard,
Okay.
and it gives you real-time insights.
So I can actually see what's going on as I'm coding.
Yeah, it's like a live view.
Wow.
You see requests, logs, how your code is being executed.
Okay.
You can even inspect the state of your databases.
So I don't just have to rely on logging or setting breakpoints.
Yo.
I can really see how it's all working.
Yeah, you can visualize everything,
That's awesome.
and it's real time, so you get immediate feedback as you're coding.
That's going to help with productivity.
For sure, it really does.
This has been an eye-opening deep dive.
It has.
This framework seems to really address a lot of the headaches that come with building back-end applications in Go,
It does.
especially when you're dealing with these complex systems.
That's fair.
It's like having a built-in DevOps team and a bunch of powerful monitoring tools.
Yeah, all rolled into one.
You've done a great job explaining all this.
Well, thank you.
If someone's listening and they're intrigued by this framework, where should they go to learn more?
The Encore documentation is a great place to start.
Okay.
They have tons of resources, tutorials, examples to help you get going.
Right.
And the community is really active, so if you have questions, just reach out.
That's really helpful advice.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for walking us through this deep dive.
It's been my pleasure.
It's clear that this framework has a lot of potential
Yeah, for sure.
to really change how Go developers approach building applications, especially those who want to build really robust and scalable systems.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm always happy to share about tools that simplify development.
Well, to everyone listening, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
We hope you learned something new about how this framework is changing the game for backend development in Filament. Go keep coding, keep exploring, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.